partisan politics in the news, and the frustration of getting to the bottom of a story, and the Parnas playbook. Like father, like son, is this a dynasty of deception? Straight up front, let me tell you two things, and we'll talk about news bias and data trade-off later. But number one, this is not a hit piece or smear piece on Aaron Parnas, and if he has any issues with it, with anything that I'm putting out here, let him address it and bring the receipts that fill the information gaps and provide clarity. I sort of like Aaron Parnas, and we are connected on LinkedIn. He accepted my invite to connect, and I kind of like him for what I believe he is, an infotainment partisan newsjack. And I can respect that despite not knowing for sure or caring what his true angle is. Because you know what, at the end of the day, what I know about him, I take him with a grain of salt, and I ignore media and most of what he says, and I go on trying to live my own life. After all, he doesn't pay my bills. And if you see me looking here and reading, that's because I had to write this very quickly so I can read this to you quickly because I've got other shit to do. Secondly, and to be very clear here as we're going through this discussion, if Trump tries to keep or otherwise retain the Qatari 747-8 for his personal use, whether to fly around in or as a piece of some sort for his presidential library, I strongly disagree with that. And I've read or heard that even Pam Bondi and Republicans such as Ted Cruz have said it would be illegal, unethical, and even unconstitutional, but we'll get a bit more into the 747 a little bit later. First, this is Lev Parnas, a master of the hustle, okay? He co-founded a company called Fraud Guarantee, which sounds about as legit as this van looks. The company's name, ironically enough, was chosen to manipulate Google search results, pairing Parnas' name with fraud in a positive light to obscure his prior fraud allegations. And by the way, Lev is a Jewish Ukrainian from Odessa when it was part of the USSR, and the family won the green card lottery to come to America, and I'll explain the potential significance of that later. Parnas was found civilly liable for duping investors out of over $2 million. This was not money for business, this was money for private jets, luxury splurges, and paying Rudy Giuliani $500,000 as a consultant. According to a Miami Herald article, Parnas, quote, left a long trail of debts in Florida and beyond, end quote. One individual, Diane Pues, stated Parnas, quote, destroyed my life, end quote, when he failed to repay money loaned for a movie project titled Anatomy of an Assassin. He also founded a company called Parnas Holdings and another company called Aaron Investments, LLC. Although there's no definitive proof, many people believe that that company, Aaron Investments LLC, was named after Aaron Parnas. I found no definitive information on whether he paid back restitution of nearly $2.3 million to his fraud victims, but I did find articles reporting that his lawyer said that he was financially struggling in 2022. Parnas and his partner, Igor Fruman, also decided to play political kingmakers, and we're talking about funneling foreign cash like $1 million from a Russian oligarch, Andrei Muraviv. Andrei is a foreign national still under U.S. indictment. Now, I know some of you think I'm operating out of a $5 million studio, but my neighbors next door are mowing their lawn. And what Andrei, Igor, and Lev were trying to do was illegally finance Trump's campaign. The group's shell company was called Global Energy Producers, or GEP, which, by the way, produced zero energy, but magically donated $325,000 to a pro-Trump super PAC with the goal of buying influence, getting cannabis licenses, and even allegedly trying to oust a U.S. ambassador. The Florida Pot Company cut its ties to Lev. Now this part here starts to align a little bit with the whole FBI crossfire hurricane, the Steele dossier, stuff the Democrats were all over regarding Russian collusion. However, the Trump and Giuliani team did have Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman travel to Ukraine to try to get dirt on Joe Biden, find out what Hunter Biden was doing out there, or find out more about this Steele dossier, or whatever else they could. And if I'm missing a piece or a detail here or there, please feel free, because there are tons of news pieces and info. Please feel free to fill in gaps or provide details. I'm not intentionally trying to mislead here. But spoiler alert, it didn't end well for Lev, Igor, and Andrei. The first two were busted and convicted of campaign finance crimes, wire fraud, and other charges. And all along, who's in the mix? Your friend and mine, Rudy Giuliani. They're all deeply entangled in these Ukraine-linked influence ops. Enter Aaron Parnas. A dual bachelor's degree at the age of 18, a law degree by the age of 21. Is he super smart, or is he part of the art? He isn't your average kid. He's super smart, and he even interned with a Giuliani-linked law firm, and the family loved Giuliani so much. Giuliani is Aaron's brother's godfather. Talk about being in an inner circle. And I'm not sure how the Godfather thing came about because, again, the Parnas and Igor Fruman, they're Jewish, and I don't think Jews typically go for the Godfather thing, but even Aaron Parnas confirms this relationship in his Substack. Aaron says he was just a fly on the wall witnessing his dad's dealings with Giuliani, but his parents even used the company named Aaron Investments for some of those political plays, and all this while he was out there door knocking for Trump. Yes, Parnas even writes in his Substack that he knocked on hundreds of doors campaigning for Trump. With his brain and his proximity, just exactly how much did he know about his father's nefarious activities? Was it all coincidence, calculated, or is this possibly a family business? Moving on to the Qatari jet, and this is where we get into current information and influence operations. Now first, keep in mind that if it's a gift to Trump, it has to go through Congress. Trump cannot accept the gift as a personal gift without congressional approval per the U.S. Constitution's Foreign Emoluments Clause, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8, which prohibits federal officials, including the president, from accepting gifts, emoluments, or titles from foreign governments without Congress's consent. Hard stop. This jet, at its value, would require explicit congressional approval. This doesn't get Trump off the hook, but New York Times just confirmed about 2 hours ago that Qatar has been trying to sell this plane for years, and there is potentially a bigger U.S. DoD Qatar deal in the works, and the two countries already have a strong mutual defense agreement. We have significant military presence in Qatar. And by the way, this would be the exact same Qatar that intelligence reports linked to funding of Hamas, Hezbollah, ISIS, and U.S. college campuses that have experienced pro-Palestinian protests. Cornell, Georgetown, Northwestern, Texas A&M, Columbia, Harvard, Yale, University of Chicago, New York, and Pittsburgh, and others have all received significant donations from Qatar, and they have all experienced pro-Palestinian protests. Although this correlation is not causation, try to keep that same balance when looking at the Qatari plane. I'll make a separate split-off post covering data trade-off and bias a little bit more, but bottom line up front, there's a lot of data and information out there, and there's a lot of bias out there. And per Aaron Parnas's, pretty much his own admission, he's pretty much a DNC operative. Now, to be fair, and hear me well here, that doesn't mean that Aaron is wrong. And again, I will cover data trade-off and bias review in another post. But check this out, and this is why the ethnic Ukrainian piece may be of significance. This document is from Lev Parnas's Global Energy Producers regarding LNG. It's available online. It came out in 2018. They wrote in 2018 of the shifting balance of power in Europe and Eastern Europe, and high interest in Israel as strong supporters of President Trump's pro-Israel policies. GEP's LNG was a fraud, but Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine and the dire situation in the Middle East is all too real, and you can see who they were trying to whale here. By the way, Ukraine to this day is still very corrupt and has a lot of organized crime. So how do you figure that Lev ended up winning the green card lottery and coming to America and Disneyland to schmooze President Trump to begin with? Again, to reiterate, not a hit or smear piece on Aaron. I kind of like Aaron in a way, but go to my next post for data trade-off, bias review, and my ultimate conclusion here.